We got a great, powerful interview I just finished with Chelsea, who went through a bunch of symptoms. And for her, she actually never knew what it was like to be normal. For 30 years, these symptoms stretched out. And then she got into the mind-body space and did a full turnaround, full recovery. It's magical, powerful. Make sure you check it out. And here we go. Hi, Chelsea. Good to have you. Excited to have this interview. Let's just get right to it. Give us the gist of, tell us about your perfect storm.
Sure. Okay. I'd like to start with a little story to give you an idea of the world that I was living in. So there was one evening, and I'm in this foggy state, and I'm hearing 911. Do I need to call an ambulance? Are you with me? And I immediately snap out of it. I'm completely conscious in this moment. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm totally fine. Because in my mind, if my parents knew what was happening, my life would probably be over. I had no idea what had just happened and why he was asking if I was okay and needed an ambulance and all these things. And then I eventually found out. He told me, well, actually, you fainted and you had an uncontrollable seizure and your eyes rolled into the back of your head. All the color just left you, and I thought you died. This guy looked like, mind you, I had never met this man in my life before this night. And
so where did this happen? Did this happen just at being out somewhere?
Yeah, so I went to meet up with one of my friends and a group of people, and we were just hanging out. Leading up to that moment, I had fainted 3 times before that moment, hearing 911, do I need to call an ambulance?
Right.
And it was probably within 20 minutes of that incident. Well, I ended up splitting my head open. He was like, you need stitches. And that led me on a wild journey for the next few months to where I was in the hospital wondering, how did I get here? I feel like I'm dying. No one can tell me what's happening to me. I'm 20 years old. How the hell did I get here?
Right.
And, I go from fainting upon standing to now doing cartwheels for fun and attending the largest mind body conference in the world. So it's been a wild ride.
That's amazing. At 20 years old. So I got to ask you, were you going to college? Were you going through a lot of stress with studying, boyfriend, toxicity stuff, life, family, blah, blah, blah? Fill me in.
Sure. Yeah. All the things, right?
You know what? Actually, let's get to the details of the symptoms first, and then we'll go back to that. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. So when I was trying to figure out how I started to experience all these symptoms, it was like, oh, well, I had mono really bad my senior year in high school. And, oh, I had surgery when I was 15 for ovarian cyst bursts and endometriosis. And then it was like, oh, well, I had pneumonia really bad in the 7th grade. Oh, but I had headaches and migraines before that. And I had allergies before that. And maybe it's when I got my tonsils removed. And maybe that's why. And then it was like, oh, but when I was 6, I got bit by a poisonous spider. So maybe that's why. But I mean, classic from allergies, headaches, migraines. When I went through puberty, I started having ovarian cyst bursts almost immediately. I started having a lot of female issues, a lot of symptoms related to being on my period.
Yep.
And started seeing specialists at a young age. When I was probably 13 is when I saw a neurologist, a rheumatologist, gynecologist, all the doctors. And then in the later years, it was like, oh, well, I think you probably have central pain processing disorder. And then it was fibromyalgia. And then it was like, I had all this pain and all these feelings of anxiety, but I didn't know what was happening really.
Yeah.
And I had all these like competing theories of what was going on with me. I didn't know who to believe and who to trust. And
Mm.
this psychiatrist was telling me one thing, and then I would tell my therapist about it, and she's like, actually, I disagree with that. I think you have this. So I was diagnosed with multiple mental health issues, bipolar disorder, anxiety, panic disorder, depression, mood disorder, PTSD. And I'm like, I don't really know. And then I have a parent that's like, I don't think you have any of it. So I'm like, what do I do?
Yeah.
One thing after another, after another. When I was at the height of my issues, Facebook was just becoming a thing.
Hmm.
Facebook groups weren't. So for context, this would have been when I was seeing the specialist was early 2000s.
Oh,
And
okay.
yes. So, and when I was in the real darkness, when things were really bad, I was alone, um, by myself in my apartment. I
Hmm.
didn't talk to anybody. And I kind of stopped, like for a while, I was searching
Right.
for reasons and explanations for my symptoms. And then I stopped that because I had to play the part that I was fine.
Hmm.
Because in my mind, if my parents knew the truth, I would have be pulled out of college, I would have to go
Yeah.
home, my life would be over, right? And then eventually that did happen because I couldn't take care of myself. I couldn't go to the bathroom anymore. I had 10 piles of garbage, 10 garbage bags piled in my kitchen because I didn't have the strength to take
Yep.
it to the dumpster, right? I'm ordering food because I can open my front door from my couch. And it was to the point where like I would sit on the trigger warning
Go
for
ahead.
like,
Get detailed. This is all about where you can get detailed.
yeah,
You can do that here.
I would sit on the toilet for 45 minutes.
Mhm.
I could not it was like I couldn't concentrate enough to contract my bladder to go to the bathroom. And then
Mhm.
I ended up in the hospital because I hadn't passed a bowel movement in I don't know how long, right? So
Yeah.
these are the things that happen to where I also had the fainting going on, but I never told anyone about that.
Right.
Again, I had this fear of, well, are people going to believe me? Are people going to tell
Mm.
me I'm making it up or it's all my fault? Or so I just lived with this stuff in silence and I had all these secrets
Hmm.
and and then I couldn't keep it together anymore. And that's when I had to ask for help. I'm like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Um, so things got really bad. This was in 2010 that things started getting really, really bad. And what really
Hmm.
scared me is when I couldn't go to class anymore. I was watching TV and I didn't know what I was watching.
Yeah.
This is when they just implemented like DVR was kind of like new and I could
Yeah.
rewind things. And I just
Hmm.
spent my entire time rewinding because I didn't know what I was watching. And this is
Yep.
when Angry Birds came out and I had a little iPod Touch and I just played Angry Birds because I couldn't do anything. It was like my body was shutting down. I couldn't take a deep breath. I felt like all this pressure and this anxiety and this just it was scary.
Hmm.
But I didn't tell anyone until I had to.
Yeah.
Um,
So you did. You dealt with that till what age did that happen? Till before you started, uh, using the mind body approach.
so in talking with my mother and looking at my old records from the pediatrician, I started experiencing symptoms from birth
Okay.
and till age 32
Hmm.
when I found this approach. And that was in January of last year, January of 2023 is when I found
Wow, that's a
this.
long time.
Yes.
So you at that point you didn't really know what it was like to be a normal person or to live without symptoms.
Right, and that was another, I mean, that was another thing. I didn't realize what OCD was until my sister had a formal diagnosis, and I was like, "Oh, you mean to tell me that's what I was experiencing?" Like, a
Mhm.
lot of what I experienced, I never told anyone. I thought it was normal. Like, how would I have known?
Yeah, that's interesting. For my story is different because I had a way to know what normal is. I could always go, "Oh, I felt like," and that's what made the symptoms even more worse because it's like I've never experienced this before. Ah, but in your case, that was all you knew, really. You were, you know, you're hitting the ground running as soon as you were, a child, with these symptoms, and they became your norm. You were
Right.
survival. That's interesting.
Yeah, and so I came up with my own theory,
Hmm.
as I feel like probably a lot of us do.
Hmm.
And what I know is I had birth trauma. So when I was born, I swallowed amniotic fluid during the birthing process and ended up in the
Yeah.
NICU. And I feel like my brain, from the moment I entered this material world, was on high alert.
Yeah.
This world is dangerous.
Hmm.
And it started perceiving everything as dangerous. And then, you go through life and there's little t traumas and there's big T traumas and
Yeah.
there's all these things that contribute to it. But I think my brain was just stayed there.
Hmm.
It stayed there.
Would you say what was your mom's and your dad's life like? Were they also going through survival before you were born?
Right. So both of my parents are the oldest. I'm the oldest as well. I've learned about that and the
Yeah.
personality of the oldest child. And my dad is an engineer.
Hmm.
He's a fixer, right?
Hmm.
And my mother is very emotional and very high anxiety. And I know that my mom was sick, like very sick whenever she was pregnant.
Hmm.
And so then you get into this, okay, so what was happening like while I was in the womb, right? And could that have affected me? I also know that, and it was, I don't, I went through a period of anger, right? When I found healing and I wanted to blame. I needed somewhere for this like anger to go. So at first it was
Yeah.
blaming all these people and the way that I was raised. And then it turned into compassion once I understood that everyone was doing the best that they could,
Yeah.
right? But like my mom was taught, like, let her cry it out. Let her cry it out in the crib by herself.
Mm.
Did that send a message of safety to the brain?
The old
Probably.
school. It's the old school way. So your mom was dealing with, like, throughout her life before, was she dealing with a lot of stress? Did she deal with parents, toxic relationship, like,
Yes.
what have you? Did she did?
Yes. So my mom was the oldest. Her father was a workaholic. He was never
Okay.
home. He was always working.
Yeah.
He worked in construction. He was a farmer providing for the family. So my mom, and she has 5 younger siblings. My mom was very much a mother to her siblings, and she did not receive this love and affection and care from her parents
Hmm.
that she needed because she was so busy taking care of her siblings because her mother was in a place of trying to run the household and everything. And so that's how my mom was raised. My dad had a mother who was an orphan her
Right.
entire life.
Well, then think about their parents. It's probably around the time the war was happening.
Right. Yeah.
So it just
And
keeps jumping to the next, and I think it's not a necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. It's just it's setting up the offspring so they can survive, right?
right. hmm
So some people might think, oh, that's horrible. Yeah, it's horrible, but I think it's a survival mechanism so that when they're born, they hit the ground running and they have more of a possibility to survive and live their life. But then we don't have a handbook to, well, once everything is calmed down a bit, now you got to regulate. So this is where it can stop with you. This is where it
Right.
stops with you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
That's it.
interesting. Awesome. Okay, so let's hit it with so we talked about the symptoms and the details of that. Um, and we talked about some of the things that brought you to your perfect storm. What did you do, and how did you find the mind body space? How did that kind of happen?
Yeah. So to back up a little bit, is it okay if I kind of go through a little bit more details?
Sure.
So in the course of 32 years of being given or experiencing a set of symptoms, seeing a doctor, being given a diagnosis, and being told this is how you treat it, which was starting from a very young age. I mean, I look at my doctor's notes and it was just like medication, 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 medication. And I'm like, that's a lot of medication for a little
I can't
child.
believe I it makes me angry when I see that that's all they can do is throw medication at people. And they don't if you were to ask them, well, even if you were to Google it, you talk to a doctor, well, why don't we just cure it? Why don't we get to the root? It's like if you were to research it, most of the things you research says, well, there is no cure. You got to manage it. Come on, right?
Right.
And if you
Yeah.
talk about curing, then you go into woo woo. Then right away it's what are you talking about? That's
Yeah.
hogwash.
Oh my gosh. I could spend an entire day talking. I
Yeah,
could I love talking about this stuff. It lights me up. There's,
yeah,
you get into these theories and you get into politics and you get into, well, the medical schools and how they train people and how are they funded and all those things. But anyway,
yep.
so
And big
I
pharma, big pharma is a big one, and
right.
BlackRock.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is like when I was a child, it was try this medication. Okay. If this doesn't work, we're going to send you to this specialist. Chances are that specialist is probably going to try you on a new medication.
Yeah,
And they're probably going to tell you to do this and that. And then they'll come up with some surgery to fix you.
yeah.
So I had my tonsils removed. Right. That was
Hmm.
the first surgery I had. Did my sore throats go away? No,
Mm,
they
yeah,
didn't. Why was that? Right? And I didn't necessarily have an infection. It's not like I was
yeah.
testing positive for strep throat. Sometimes I was without tonsils, but there was never an answer to that, right?
You know what? I also noticed that a lot of things that people do, also in my generation, things were normalized. It's like, oh yeah, you just got to you got to have that taken out. Oh yeah, you just do this, you got to take that, blah, 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 you got to go on that medication, blah, blah, blah. But it
Mhm.
wasn't normal. If you really think about it, a lot of the shit is not normal what we've been going through. But
Right.
it was normalized. So you just, right, whenever you had a cold, you went on antibiotics. I think I went on antibiotics probably 10 times in my life or
Yeah.
more. Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I did all this, mainstream Western medicine type things. Eventually, later in my later teenage, early adult years, my mother started getting back to her roots in natural remedies, right?
mhm. You can help me by subscribing so I can bring more awareness to the mind body space so that I can help people get their lives back. Now, let's get back to the interview.
But like leading up to that point, I, in high school, when I had all these things going on, which, and you think about it, it's like, oh, well, it's no wonder why as she got older, she kept experiencing more issues because she kept having more responsibility and
Yeah.
more stress, right? So,
It all
but,
adds up. It all adds up to fill up your bucket. It starts to overflow.
oh,
All the things that you were talking about, with the surgeries and the medications when you're a kid, teenage,
right.
20s, blah 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 blah. It all accumulatively adds up, and then you know,
Mhm.
then it brought you to where you were. So
Right.
it all makes sense. It's not a mystery, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. But so my parents played a really big role in how I was able to keep the bucket from completely overflowing.
Yeah,
Because I was very much influenced like, well, if you're feeling like that, then maybe you can't go to the pool. Or maybe you don't need to go spend the night at your friend's house. Or so I was very much incentivized to try my best to forget that things were going on with me. And like I said, a lot of the things I thought were normal
right.
anyway. But when things were
Right.
really bad, that's when it to the point where this is an interesting one. When I was a senior in high school, I started having crazy symptoms.
Yeah.
Like I'd always had pain and allergies and headaches and female issues and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But I started having, it's like, and now I know there's a term for this. It's called Alice in Wonderland syndrome. Alice in Wonderland syndrome. I don't know if
Mhm.
you're familiar with this, but, and I
What is
didn't
it?
know this
For anybody
until,
who's listening, give us the details.
yeah. So it's, if you've seen Alice in Wonderland, it's very much like that. Your brain goes into these rabbit holes of layers upon layers of details that do not exist in this normal three-dimensional reality we're in. So when I was typing a paper for school, I wasn't just typing ideas on a page. I was analyzing how my fingers were moving. And as the letters were typing, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Is an H, is that one fluid motion, or is it like a stick and then a branch off a stick? And I wonder who came up with this. And like, oh, I wonder what their mind was like. And I wonder where they came from. And I wonder where the people, like the parents of that person, where they came from. And oh my gosh, were they hunter and gatherers? And then I would feel clothing like, oh my gosh, is this cotton? Where did the cotton come from? Who picked the cotton? How is it strung? And my
Yeah.
brain was like,
You were a squirrel.
I got so scared. And my parents just moved and they gave me a box of things. And in this box was the note that I wrote them that said, I feel like I'm going crazy. I need help. And I
Hmm.
slipped it under their door late at night because I was afraid they would take me and lock me up somewhere.
Yeah.
And I wasn't ready for that. So I was like, go see it in the morning and I can hopefully sleep and we'll deal with it then. Anyway, long story short, I go to a psychiatrist. And after this huge, long, intense interview, he has one question for me. Have you ever been tested for mono? What?
Mono.
Mono,
Okay.
right? So ended up getting tested for mono, which was one of my theories a long time ago, that all my health conditions started with mono, which I've since disproven. But
Yeah.
my EBV titers levels were higher than they had ever seen in my doctor's office, to the point where 2 years after the initial infection, I was still testing as if I had a current infection. And
Hmm.
so that actually prompted me, like when I first went to college, I was like, oh, I'm going to be a doctor, because that was life changing for me, that the mind could be that powerful when the physical body was not presenting symptoms.
Yeah.
So because it was normalized, physical symptoms were so normal for me.
Hmm.
It's like my brain was like, how can we get this girl's attention? Because something is seriously wrong here.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, so over the years, all the things.
Yep.
Eventually in high school, they had sent me to this children health and illness recovery program, which was um I think it was a neuropsychologist that I saw,
Hmm.
because I was such a sick child. Obviously, it was affecting me mentally, emotionally, socially, everything. It wasn't about that all of those, the mental, the emotional, the social, the biopsychosocial model is what was causing all of these things, right? Because no one asked when I went to the doctor, okay, so you're having headaches. What is school like? No one asked me if I was bullied, because that was a
Yep.
part of my childhood, right?
That'll
Um,
that'll do a big part, because then you have anxiety, go to school, facing people, and survival. You're constantly in survival. That's a huge thing.
right. And would I have actually been honest about it? Because that's another thing too. I
Right.
don't know at what point in my life I realized or felt that being honest was dangerous or scary,
Mm.
but it was really hard for me. And it probably, again, why I kept a lot of what I was experiencing to myself.
Well, you're
And
also smart. A smart person knows, well, if I say this, this is going to pan out, and that's going to cause me more problems. So so you know your environment, you know the people very well that are in your life. So you play things out, and you try to think to yourself, is that worth it? Probably not. So I'm just going to keep this to myself.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And then, so the turning point for me, when there's a couple moments in time that really influenced how I began to manage my
Hmm.
symptoms. One was the first one being, I think this is the first one I went to. So online support groups weren't really a thing. But there was an in-person at the public library. There was a fibromyalgia support group. And at first it was like, oh my gosh,
You're not a freak. You're not
I
alone.
I'm like, yeah, like these people, they love me, they get me, they understand me. They're not telling me this is all in my head, or
Yep.
that, oh my gosh, you're so young and you're an athlete and you're smart and you go to college. Like,
Hmm.
there's nothing wrong with you. Um, so it felt very validating to have that. And then I realized I do not want to be these people, because I think I was 19 the first time I went, and these people were in their 40s and 50s and 60s complaining about how, oh, they've worked as a nurse for 20 years and now they can't work as a nurse and now they can't hold their grandkids. And I'm like,
Right.
excuse me, but fuck you. You actually got to live a life and you actually got to graduate college and you actually got to have children. Like, I don't want to hear this nonsense. Like, are you kidding me? And in that,
Well, yeah. Just like the Facebook groups, they're in a way they're programming you because you're around all the negativity, all the, well, you better go on disability now. You better get used to it. This is the life, and you're not gonna, like, I've been dealing with this for 20 years. You're not gonna be able to, right? And then you program doubt, 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 fear, fear. Makes sense. I've been through that.
don't even get me started on those
Horrible,
groups.
horrible.
But yeah, so from that moment, I made a decision. I am going to figure this shit out, because I cannot if you're telling me this is the future for me, like, I
Yeah,
might as well kill myself.
yeah, it's crushing.
And I didn't want that. Like, I'm supposed to be living the best years of my life as a teenager with like my friends and having a grand old time. And I just, I had to find a way. I had to find a way. And then I went to, after that hospital stay that I mentioned in the beginning, they ended up getting me into the Cleveland Clinic. So the Cleveland Clinic has a pediatric pain rehab program where I lived in the hospital for 3 weeks and did occupational therapy, aquatic therapy, physical therapy, recreational therapy. We saw psychiatrists and psychologists and all the things. It was like intensive all day, every day. Um, and they gave me a lot of tools,
Yep.
right? And so then I continued exploring these tools. Um, that I hadn't been exposed to before. And at that point, people were telling me, like, oh, I heard, like, my grandmother sent me chili pepper capsules in the mail to try. And my chiropractor told me to try blue algae supplements. And then I read
Oh
about,
man, all the supplements. I know, spending probably thousands, and they made me actually feel worse. Except for magnesium too. Uh, then I also, the coping mechanisms of diets. The only thing that worked for me was a carnivore diet, but that was again a coping mechanism. Did you also go
yeah,
down that rabbit hole with diets?
yep. Well, at this fibromyalgia support group, a nutritionist came and she told me the key to pain relief was getting a food sensitivity test.
Hmm.
Oh, so that started the whole. Before that, I had already had all these allergies. Like, I didn't,
Yeah.
how can you be allergic to lettuce? Like, these things that are just like, lettuce is like
Yeah.
water from the earth, basically.
Yeah, it's like a
You know?
cucumber. Well, there's
Right,
people that are allergic to water, so right, but
right.
that
So,
just reaffirms. It just reaffirms it's not the food, it's not the mold, it's not the lime, it's not. It's just that where you're sitting at, you're in survival. Where your bucket's full,
yeah,
your baseline's at 1,000. So it just reaffirms everything, because if you think about it, yes, it's real. We've been through it,
Mhm.
but if you understand what's going on, right, you know, actually it's not that. It was just that last drop, and it got the blame, right? It's
Right.
just, that's all it was. It just got the blame for it. So then people
Right.
get stuck in all these labels, and then, you know, here we go, and then they just, you know, get traumatized by their symptoms, and they fuel the fire and start researching, like we've done, like most of us have, right? Which is, you
Yeah.
know, it's normal. I understand. I've been through it. I did all the research, fell down all the, you know, detoxes. I'm sure you've did all the detoxing and the, you know.
Avocado smoothie detox. I didn't know
Yeah,
that was a thing. I bathed in apple cider vinegar for days
yeah.
on end to detox. Like, yeah. Mhm.
Oh yeah, I did the coffee enemas. I did the I tried to get my biome back in order, and I would drink these fermented cabbage juices, and also I went crazy. I did the fermented meat that was rotting for a
Mm,
month. I tried that shit. Uh, I also did the, what was it, the pine needle oil, which
mm.
is another form of paint thinner. I did all kinds of stupid, crazy shit, but I was so desperate that I
Right.
was willing to do anything. Right?
And
I did all the detoxes and everything. Yeah.
everyone promised this is
Yeah.
the cure.
Okay, but this one is. I know you tried everything else, but this one, just try
And,
this. Trust me.
you know, so some of those things, it was like, "Oh, yeah, this is helping. I
Yeah. Yeah.
feel better." Now I know why that was, right? Um, so I was doing all these things along the way, and then I got sober, and that was a really big part of my leading up to true healing was
Yep.
the idea of in recovery, I learned the idea of acceptance, right?
Yep.
And I came to accept that okay, well, maybe these are the cards I've been dealt. I have a choice what I'm going to do with them, and I'm going to find a way to just accept this for what it is and keep finding ways to be, you know, a human on this planet. Like, was I
Yeah.
happy? No, not necessarily. Like happy, eh.
Right.
um, but could I accept things? Yeah, I could. I was really good at accepting things, and I talked about my parents playing a role in keeping me from that bucket completely tipping over because I had always had this like once I ended up back in my parents' house. First of all, I never thought I would ever be able to leave their house again,
Yeah.
but I was like, okay, love my parents,
Yeah.
beyond
Of course.
grateful for everything they've done for me,
Yeah.
but I cannot live with you.
No. No. Yeah.
I can't. Like so finally they they were going to move away, which was great. But right before they moved away, my last semester in college was really, it took me 8 years to get an undergrad, to get my
Hmm.
bachelor's degree because of all these things.
Yeah.
And I started having such horrible cognitive issues. And at this point in time, I was relatively okay. I was managing because I was doing acupuncture and eating healthy and exercising and going to the chiropractor and going to the
Yeah.
massage therapist and doing all these things, which now I understand is like, oh, yeah, that was inducing the relaxation response. That was giving me feel good hormones when I exercised, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I would have these temporary moments of relief. And not every time. I mean, sometimes I went to the chiropractor and it sent me into a huge flare, which
Yep.
was also confusing. Like, how come sometimes this works and sometimes it makes me feel like hell? I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but I started having these cognitive issues where I didn't know what words meant. And I
Hmm.
had to download the dictionary app on my phone. My professor was speaking, and I would be like searching accomplish or biology or teacher because
Or
these
hand.
new
Or
or
sky.
hand because I'm like,
Yeah.
I know it's there, but I
And you
can't.
feel dumb too. And people look at you dumb too when they ask you a question. You're like, "What? Huh?"
Right.
I'm like, "I'm not dumb. I swear. I just got, you know, my brain's going slow right now. Fuck. I remember there was a time, a couple of times where I was coming home and I had to pull over because I forgot where I lived and it was down the street from my house.
Mhm.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's like the brain's buffering. It's like, right.
Mhm.
So it's like, oh, and that can be scary too. It's like, what do I have? Do I have dementia, early onset dementia? And then you
Right.
freak out about that.
Right. So I go to a neurologist naturally,
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
and she said, "I think your problem is Lyrica, the medication." And I had been on Lyrica for years to manage fibromyalgia. And
Oh,
so that led me on a whole thing that I won't even get into, getting off that medication, which was a
right.
complete nightmare.
Yeah.
But so my degree is in Spanish. I
Hmm.
couldn't communicate in English, so that was I also had to grieve the idea that I finally was going to possibly get a degree in something that I cannot use because I cannot speak the language. And I went to my Spanish professor and I begged him. I have been in school for 8 years. Please pass me. I cannot complete this exam. Like, I know you taught me this and this and this, but please, like, for the love of God, pass me because I didn't know what else. There was no functioning at that point.
Right.
But then my parents were moving away, so I had to make a decision. Okay, so I'm graduating college. I can't use my degree in the way that I wanted to use my degree. I don't know what the heck I'm going to do, but I cannot move away with my parents. I'm going to have to figure this out. Again, I'm very motivated
Hmm.
to find a way to power through, make it through, manage
Yeah.
whatever craziness I have going on. Ironically, I found the first full-time job that would pay my bills and offer insurance because at that time I was 26, getting kicked off my parents' insurance, which also was a really big motivator for me to get healthy
Yeah.
because I wasn't
Right.
going to be on their insurance and whatever. So I got a job at a pain management clinic.
Interesting.
Interesting, right? Um, so it's funny how things have kind of come full circle
Hmm.
since then. Like I've been a patient in pain at a pain management clinic. I've worked in pain management, and now I help manage other people's pain, but
Yeah.
not manage, right?
Right.
Because there is a
Fully
way
recover.
beyond this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so all through these years, I was like trying these different things, and I was picking up these ideas along the way. That when I finally discovered this approach, it was like everything connected. All
Yeah.
these neurons fired. And it was, at the time, it seemed miraculous. But now I see how all these bits and pieces along the way led to a very swift recovery for me.
Okay.
So, do you want to get into that piece, like how I
Yeah.
discovered this?
Well, how did you? Was it the TMS world that you got into, or neuroplasticity, or brain retraining? What did you get into?
Sure. So, at this point in time, so January 2023, I had found a way to live with and manage
Hmm.
everything. Um, so I wasn't looking for a solution at all. My
Right.
sister just told me, "Hey, I'm in this health program and they recommended some tools for people with chronic pain." So she recommended the book The Way Out and by Alan Gordon. So that was
Alan
the
Gordon.
first
Okay.
book I read.
Somatic tracking. A lot of he does
Yes,
specializes in
pain
that. Okay.
reprocessing therapy, yes.
Yeah.
So, and this is where that spiritual piece comes in a little bit.
Yes.
I was a very spiritual person before this, but obviously since healing it's even like way up
Oh
there.
yeah.
But
It's like a. I always like to say it's like a forced awakening.
yes. Yeah. So I'm lying on my couch. I'm probably a third of the way through The Way Out, and I heard this voice. It wasn't an audible voice. It was like an inner knowing.
Hmm.
You are going to heal yourself and you are going to help other people heal themselves. And I'm like, Okay, this is weird. I don't even know like what I'm reading or if I believe it yet, but okay, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I read this book, and long story short, like I read that book, and then the second recommendation by my sister was The Great Pain Deception by Steve Azanich.
Right.
And in
I have
his
that
book,
book. Yeah, I have that one.
it was a very powerful book for me. So, like, The Way Out gave me this scientific understanding of what was happening,
Right.
right? And I could get on board with that.
Right.
And then Steve Azanich in The Great Pain Deception, he's a layperson just like me, talking
Right.
about the hell he went through and how he got out of it. And that was really powerful for me. So, and in his book, he does a great job at referencing all these other books and articles and studies, and he has a whole slew of resources. So, like a good perfectionist, obsessive person that I am, I
Right.
went on eBay and ordered 20 books. And
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about TMS until I read his book.
Hmm.
So that's when I discovered TMS. So the
So did you get
neuroplasticity.
into the Dr. Sarno's books and all that stuff?
So yes. So when I read The Great Pain Deception and I bought all the other books, Sarno was in there.
Yep.
Louise Hay. I've read so many books, and I started reading them in the order that they were published
Hmm.
because I'm like, I want to. How did we get to where we are? Right?
Hmm.
How did we not know about this before? And so that
Right.
was really powerful too, to just kind of read these books as science kind of evolved. And I didn't know what coaches were. I didn't know there were people helping people through. Because I learned to stay off the internet a while ago. So that
Right.
wasn't even a thing. Um, but when I decided I want to figure out how I can help people, that's when I discovered coaching. And then I started thinking about it. I was like, well, I basically just treated all these authors as my own coach.
Right.
So when Alan said, like, do somatic tracking, like in that moment reading the book, I stopped and I did it. And
Right.
when Steve in The Great Pain Deception said, I made myself go for a run, I literally went for a run
Yep.
in that moment. And when Louise Hay talks about looking in the mirror and saying, I love you, I did that.
Hmm.
And that's kind of how I just started this healing
Right.
process.
And you just kind of created a routine for yourself and you kept doing the methods every day. And then you started seeing some shifts.
Yeah, and it was at first it was very, very obsessive,
Right.
very regimented,
Hmm.
very has to be this way. And then I realized, oh, this is the pressure that they're talking about. And this is like how obsession and perfectionism can create stress. And
Hmm.
I experienced more symptoms as a result of that. And so it gradually became after I questioned everything I knew to be true about everything in this world,
Yeah.
because I'm like, how am I just learning this from a book at 32 years old when for 32 years I saw so many doctors and all
Yep.
these people? So that was a
It's
whole thing.
weird. It's weird how the universe decided to give you the information then and not before because it wanted you to go through all the suffering and all the bullshit so that you knew what it was like. So that when you do the healing, you learn so much about yourself. You discover, you have an awakening. And now, because of it, you're a better place. It's like a gift, right? But it doesn't seem like a gift when you're going through it, obviously.
No,
But it makes sense.
no.
Everything it's like a perfect orchestra that happened, even
Yeah,
though we didn't like the
I am
feelings.
I am so grateful to have been through and experience everything I did. And honestly, if I did not have as many symptoms from as many conditions as I had and have tried as many approaches as I had tried, I
Right.
don't know if it would have, I don't think it would have clicked for me. Like,
Right. It's
I
true.
believe in God, higher power, universe laying out this path for me and presenting it in a space where I was open. Because it was like when I read these books, it was like I was plugged in.
Yeah.
And, just like using some kind of appliance, like it's there and it has all the tools, but you have to have the power.
Right.
And when I was plugged in, it was like it all made sense to me.
Right.
But yeah, I just,
So you just kept plugging away with understanding. Everything started to fit like a puzzle, and then you
Mhm.
start noticing symptoms started to lift.
Yeah. So what was really transformational was I made a conscious decision to take my power back.
Hmm.
And I truly believed I had everything within myself to heal myself.
Yep.
And I started trusting myself for the first time in forever because I had placed my trust in all these other professionals who
Yeah.
said that they were going to cure me and fix me and they had the solution and the cure and whatever. And when I realized, like, oh, I have that within myself, my body is designed, it's designed to heal itself.
Yeah.
Um, and began trusting. And then it was very much like, okay, like I don't have to put pressure on myself to do this at this time, somatic tracking at this time,
Yep.
raging on the page at this time. It was very much, it became very intuitive. Like, you know,
Yeah.
God, higher power, my higher self, like would just give me this little nudge, like, oh, this could be an opportunity to be with yourself and just notice what you're experiencing. Or this could be an opportunity to push yourself and go for a run, right?
Hmm.
And a month in, I ate an ice cream cone for the first time in over a decade because I had given up gluten, just
Right.
like I had given up dairy and soy and all the other things.
Yeah.
And I ate an ice cream cone. I was at this basketball game and it was my favorite. I'm a really big Kentucky Wildcat fan, basketball
Hmm.
fan. So I'm at this game, and you'd think I would be super into the game, but all I could think about was this spiritual experience I was having with me and my ice cream cone. And I didn't tell anyone about
Yeah.
my journey yet because I was still very skeptical. Like, is this going to be like Reiki and acupuncture and the chiropractor? And
That's the
it's going
thing.
to,
I had to keep it to myself because I didn't want people sabotaging me or going, "Oh yeah, yeah, he's right." I didn't want them going, "No, you should try this." Oh, that doesn't make, because I knew that it would give me doubt, and I wouldn't, I'd be sabotaged, and I didn't want that. So I
right.
kept it to myself until I was confident that this was it, and then I, recovered.
Same.
Then I started telling people, and I still didn't get, the response I was expecting. People thought it was all hogwash. So, and the only way I was able to have people, resonate with me was online, right? Doing
Mhm.
this. That's when people are like, "Oh no, yeah, yeah." But family, friends, yeah, right. They thought I was crazy.
Mhm. Yeah. So very much my story too. So just
Hmm.
me and my ice cream cone had a moment together when I didn't have any symptoms.
Right.
And I was like, is this for real? Is this, and from there it was just things, and I'm not saying it was smooth sailing.
No, no.
You know, definitely a roller coaster and trying to really establish a relationship with myself. And at first it was like, oh, I need to get my mind and my body on the same page. And then it was like, actually, they are one. I just don't know where I fit in, this mind of mine fit into the equation of influencing that body mind. How can I communicate effectively? How can I influence what it is presenting in the physical body, right? So that was a roller coaster,
Right.
but it's been beautiful and amazing, and it feels miraculous. I mean, I think
Hmm.
about it, and it's not like everything's perfect all the time. Like a part of my story that I didn't even get into, but 2.5 months or 2 months into healing, I ended up in the hospital. I thought I was having another ectopic pregnancy. I've recurrent miscarriage as part of my story, which
Hmm.
I have a theory about infertility and mind
Yeah.
body stuff,
Yeah, makes sense.
from my own experience. But I go to the hospital because I'm thinking I have an ectopic pregnancy, which I've had before, which is very dangerous and scary and can kill you.
Hmm.
And I'm questioning because I'm 2 months into this journey and I'm like, is this psychosomatic? You start to question everything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, is this just my brain? Did this sensation trigger this, fear response in the brain? And now the pain lit up because that pathway is associated from when I actually did have an ectopic pregnancy. And I asked the
Hmm.
physician in the emergency department, I'm like, could this, and they're like pumping me full of pain medication because I am literally dying. And I'm like, could this be psychosomatic? And they looked at me like I was crazy.
Well,
And
then if they're doing the tests on you, they know if it's, if you're fine, right?
right. Well, and that ended up being a whole, I'm not sure really what happened with that. I did not keep the pregnancy, but we aren't sure if it was ectopic, if it was a cyst that burst, if we aren't really sure what happened there.
But did they say, oh, no, everything's is checking out, everything's fine, you can go home now? Did everything?
I stayed for a day because they really wanted to do, and this is where I have to continue to work through my resentments and feelings towards the healthcare system.
Mhm.
But this physician told me, she was like, you can't eat or drink. We're probably going to do surgery. And since it's on the same side as the last ectopic pregnancy, well, we might just go ahead and remove the tube just to be sure. So then have all this fear, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose a part of my body. And like, maybe I'll never be able to have children. And and I'm completely dehydrated, haven't eaten,
Yeah.
and I'm sitting there, laying there, like with all this fear and all this anxiety, thinking about all of these things. And then eventually they told me, well, we're going to have to continue to monitor your levels and see what's really going on. So we're not going to do surgery. And I'm like,
So at the end of that, did they actually find anything?
no,
Right. So from what my experience is, when I started doing this journey and I started moving forward, the brain didn't like change because it perceived it as dangerous. So it would throw me the kitchen sink at me. It gave me more resistance. And it usually, what it does is it would mimic something that happened in your past, right? For me, it was diverticulitis surgery. And I would have the exact same pains that I had during my trauma with that situation. And it would feel like, oh fuck, I better go to the hospital again. This feels exactly the same, right? With all the other symptoms too, right? It would mimic it
right.
and go, look, this is real. I know the other 50,000 times that I've been doing this with you, it wasn't real. Those were false alarms, but this one's real. You got to go. So it was getting desperate to get my attention to the fake ligers that weren't really there. So then there's many times I slipped up to, and I went to the hospital. There was a period I went to the hospital 3 times a week, right? Because this symptom, it duped me. I got sucked into it. I was like, this is real. And I go there, no, everything's fine. Your oxygen's at 98, blah, blah, blah. Everything's blah, blah, blah. The CT scan says, right? And then eventually I had to try to break that cycle by when those symptoms would come up, and it would mimic something, I would have to go, okay, let's you know what? I want that to happen. I want that thing to burst. And I want that to be there for the next week. And I would call it for its bullshit. And sometimes I still slipped. But eventually, I got to the point where I trusted my body and I started to call its bluff. And it stopped eventually doing that. But I've known this for myself. I got duped by the false alarms, and the way it would mimic shit is crazy.
It is really crazy and
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
And
It's amazing, actually.
it's so cool. You think about like how, and this is where I also got to, it was like, if my brain was that powerful, and I know it was only trying to protect me, right?
Yeah.
It was doing its job. It was doing a really good job at trying to protect
Yeah.
me. But if it is that powerful to create these real physiological changes, symptoms. They're not made up. They are real. I mean,
Yeah.
we produce physical tears,
Yeah.
in response to an emotional trigger, right?
I
So
had ulcerative colitis for 7 years, right? Don't have it anymore, but it was real. It's autoimmune. That shit's real. Shit bleeds. Shit, shit happens. So it's
right,
not, some people when they this is what bugs me about the mind body space, especially the TMS area. We're like, well, that's not TMS. That doesn't qualify for TMS because that's real. So that we don't that doesn't qualify. And for me, that's where I put it on the shelf, the TMS label, and I go, well, it's mind body. Mind body got you there. Mind body's keeping you there, and mind
mhm,
body can get you out. Right?
right. Well, if the brain is that powerful to create symptoms, it's got to be that powerful to facilitate healing. You
Yeah.
can't tell, like, if I know anything about science, right? Like, there's no way it can't facilitate healing. And yeah, all these conditions that people experience are real. Symptoms are real. It
Right.
doesn't mean that healing is impossible just because there's a certain label there.
Right.
And, we can argue about, like, well, it was precipitated by a car accident or an infection or whatever. But at the end
Yeah.
of the day, like, it's really, for me, this is my take on it. It's just the human condition, right? Like, you can call, if TMS resonates with you, or mind body syndrome, or
Hmm.
neuroplastics, like, if that facilitates your healing, great. Call it whatever you want. But for me, it's just the human condition, right?
Yeah.
There's
For
nothing
me,
wrong.
I the way I describe it is, I think I would say, I used to say 95, just to be polite, but now I would say 99% of the things that are out there in this world that are syndromes, diseases, you can recover with the mind body, right? And it all has to do with your allostatic load, your baseline being at 1,000, and turning off alarms, bringing back things to standby, resetting everything, and then your body's able to get back into um, ease instead of coming out of dis-ease, right? And I think
Right,
that's everything. Sure, falling down the stairs, you're going to break a leg. Okay, that's a little different. But I think
right,
for me, this is what I've seen. This is what I feel from my journey. I would say 99% of the things is from the mind body.
right. And that's not to say either that, like, physicians and doctors and all these, treatments and whatever's out there that I mean, those are necessary, 100%, right? It's
Hmm.
not to discount any of that, right?
Right, right.
It can also be this and this. It doesn't have to be either or. And I think that's where some people that I've worked with personally get hung up. It's like it has to be one or the other. But what if you just allow it to be both? What if
Yeah,
you do practice mind body in addition to seeing your regular doctor?
right. Why not? Keep it there. If that makes it also feel better, give you a little bit of safety, that's okay. Keep it there. And then, when you recover, then the truth afterwards. But
Right.
what I don't like is in some of these gurus or people online or the TMS world where they go, well, take the test, and then you'll find out if you qualify, right?
Mm,
And then people, when they don't qualify, it's like, oh no, am I stuck with this? The doubt comes in, and they feel like they're a special
right,
case, right? And that's for me. It's like, no, you qualify. Throw out that stupid test. You don't need a test, right?
right,
Just throw it into the mind body space. If you need to, keep in good contact with your doctor, work with your doctor, and give your body a chance. Give your body a chance to do what it is able to do.
right. Well, and that's where, like, for me personally, I feel like that mindset piece is so important.
Yeah,
It
number
was
one.
so important to my healing, is just having this mindset of, first of all, believing that it's possible,
Hmm.
right? I have to have some kind of belief, because what am I doing if, and maybe I don't necessarily, like, I didn't necessarily believe it was possible for me, but I believed that Alan Gordon believed in
Yeah,
his approach and that it worked for him. And I believed in what Steve said and that it worked for him. And that
right.
was enough for me to open my mind to this approach, right?
And to believe in yourself. along the way.
Exactly.
All right. Well, this leads me to the last question. What would you give someone? What advice would you give someone that's just, just like you when you're going into this field?
Mhm.
If somebody, were to email you and they're like, okay, I'm about to read that book. I'm about to start. What advice would you give them?
I would say embrace the journey
Hmm.
and treat yourself with kindness.
Yeah.
That self-compassion piece is so important, and for me was so important. And I would say enjoy the journey, but it's
Yeah.
easier
I
hindsight
want
being
to say
20,
that too. I want to say that too,
right?
but I'm like, I can't fucking say that. Come on, it doesn't
Right.
make sense. But it does make
Can I
sense.
can I read something? So I was going
Sure.
through
Yeah.
my journals recently, and I read this. This is from 2011, just for context.
Hmm.
And it was like, I'm just gonna read it and then
Sure.
share a little bit. So it says, ugh, I hate feeling like this. I want to smile and be happy. I want to be carefree and have no worries. I want to be positive. I want to laugh and have a good time. I want to be confident and feel good about myself. I want to be happy go lucky and not have a care in the world. I want to live in the moment. I want to have no regrets. I want to feel joy and have love. I want to know God and shine his light. I want to feel myself again. I want to feel whole and not be empty inside. I want to be sure of myself. I want to find my place in this world. For now, I wait.
Hmm.
Try to keep my heart open and not lose my mind. I will keep faith. And that makes me emotional because
Yeah.
it was so dark.
Hmm.
And that was like completely inconceivable that that was possible for me, but it is. Like, I have
Right.
all of that now, right?
Yep.
It's so beautiful.
It's like you can go back in time if you were to talk to yourself and that girl. You would tell your young self, "Thank you for all the work that you're gonna do because it got me where I am now, and you will see the light. And
Yeah.
thank you for keeping the faith.
Yes.
It's powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is just send me all your information. I'll put it in the description so anybody can get a hold of you. And I want to thank you for being a part of this. This was
Thank
powerful.
you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll talk sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
All right,
Sounds good.
bye-bye.